On enhancing capacity building in small island developing states, and good morning again. For those who just arrived, I'm Roberta Ianna. I'm the co-chair of the Paris Committee on Capacity Building and lead on Working Group 1 of the PCCB on enhancing coherence and coordination of capacity building. And we are pleased to share this session with the OECD as a strong representation of coherence, coordination, and reflections on lessons learned, as well as work towards a more effective capacity building for climate action. And again, before moving into the technical session, I'll briefly present the coherence and coordination work of Working Group 1 of the PCCB. At COP25 in 2019, the PCCB was reviewed and given a 5-year extension, refining its mandate to 3 priority areas: enhancing coherence and coordination of capacity building under the Convention with a focus on avoiding duplication of efforts, including through collaboration with bodies under and outside the Convention, identifying capacity gaps and needs, and promoting awareness raising, knowledge and information sharing and stakeholder engagement. In the same year, the CMA decided that the PCCB shall also serve the Paris Agreement and confirmed that these 3 priority areas also apply to the PCCB work under the Paris Agreement. Coherence and coordination of capacity building under the Convention and the Paris Agreement has thus been integrated as one of the 3 priority areas in the PCCB's work plan 2021 to 2024. To advance work under this mandate and following consultation with its party and non-party stakeholders, the PCCB in 2021 established the Informal Coordination Group for Capacity Building under the Convention and the Paris Agreement, in short, the ICG, to create a conducive space for representative of constituted bodies, operating entities, and relevant processes under the Convention and the Paris Agreement to coordinate climate change-related capacity building plans and activities and allow for better sharing of information, coherence, and identification of opportunities. The ICG currently comprises representatives of 16 UNFCCC bodies, entities and processes that meet twice yearly in conjunction with the 2 UNFCCC sessions. And if you would like to learn more about the ICG and its work, please use the QR code in the slide and you will be sent to the web page with all the information. The work under the ICG is complemented by coherence and coordination-focused collaborations of the PCCB with bodies outside the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And to maximize the effectiveness of this work, the PCCB in 2019 launched the PCCB Network, which is a voluntary association of interested stakeholders engaged in climate-related capacity building. And members can share information and good practices on their work, contribute to the work of the PCCB in fulfilling its mandate, and seek to connect with their peers across sectors and regions. And we have currently 386 network members, including our colleagues of the OECD. And again, there's the QR code for those who want to receive more information and maybe join the PCCB network. This dual approach of engaging with UNFCCC and non-UNFCCC bodies and stakeholders via these two arms, the ICG and the PCCB network, has proven to be very conducive in a broadly facilitating coherence and coordination of capacity building efforts. And today we are happy to share a major representation of the ICG's coherence and coordination efforts through the launch of 6 capacity building e-booklets. Produced with resources from members represented in the ICG, the booklets focus on climate action for 6 thematic areas: transparency, mitigation, adaptation and resilience, climate finance, climate technology, as well as a broader booklet focused on effective capacity building for climate action, including mainstreaming of human rights, gender, indigenous knowledge, education, and youth. Collectively, all the 16 ICG member body contributed with 172 capacity building resources to the booklets. And resources include tools and methodologies, technical support, e-courses, and other relevant online resources. We warmly invite you to scan this QR code as well to get the booklet, and for now, allow me to share with you some example of these booklets, starting with transparency. So the transparency booklet showcases 18 resources from 3 ICG bodies. I will begin by highlighting 2 examples of on-the-ground transparency work. The first resource falls under the category of technical support. This initiative from the Global Environmental Facility is on capacity building for transparency. It strengthens national institutions for transparency-related activities, provides relevant tools, training and assistance for meeting provisions stipulated under Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, and assists in improvement of transparency over time. The second resource comes from the consultative group of experts and fall under the category of other online resources. Their transparency needs assessment assesses the existing and emerging needs and gaps of developing countries in implementing the existing measurement, reporting, and verification arrangements, and preparing for the ATF, the Enhanced Transparency Framework, and prepares annually a technical paper containing the result. The next booklet is on mitigation, and it comprises 13 resources from 6 ICG bodies. One example is under tools and methodologies and comes from Katowice Committee of Experts on the impact of the implementation of response measures. Their paper titled Implementation of Just Transition and Economic Diversification Strategies, a compilation of best practices from different countries, uses real-world and concrete examples to summarize the best practices and strategies regarding implementation of just transition and economic diversification from various sectors, with the aim to reduce GIG emissions or manage the impacts of climate change. Another example is the PA-aligned tool from the Least Developed Countries Expert Group, and the objective of this tool is to guide the least developed countries to effectively and efficiently navigate and address the many elements of the Paris Agreement in order to fulfill their obligation and requirements as a part of limiting the global rise in temperature to 1.5 degrees. Third booklet on adaptation, and it's on adaptation and resilience, and it hosts 40 resources from 9 ICG bodies. The first resource is the Santiago Network for Averting, Minimizing, and Addressing Loss and Damage Associated with the Adverse Effect of Climate Change from the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage Executive Committee. And this network was established to catalyze technical assistance to implement relevant adaptation approaches at local, national, and regional level in developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. The next resource is the UN Climate Change and University Partnership Program for the Nairobi Work Program. And this is an opportunity for graduate students to work closely with local, national, and regional partners to undertake a research project as a part of producing their master thesis. It is designed to strengthen collaboration between the UNFCCC, UN, and academic and research institutions, especially in the Global South, with the aim of addressing knowledge gaps that remain a critical barrier to countries implementing adaptation measures. Finally, I will offer an example from tools and methodologies from the Adaptation Committee titled Navigating the Landscape of Support for the Process to Formulate and Implement National Adaptation Plans. This publication provides an overview of the landscape of support available for adaptation and of the targeted programs and initiatives that have been set up to facilitate the formulation and implementation of NAPs. And the next booklet is on technology. The climate technology booklet has 26 resources from 5 ICG bodies, and the first featured resource is Building Capacities in Climate Technology, which is from the Technology Executive Committee. It's under the category of tools and methodologies, and this publication focuses on gaps, needs, and challenges, as well as enabling measures to develop and enhance countries' endogenous capacities and technologies. The second resource under tools and methodologies I would like to highlight is from the Enhanced Lima Work Program on Gender. They report on the in-session workshop on gender-responsive climate policy with a focus on mitigation, action, and technology development and transfer include issues related to the gender aspects of UNFCCC processes, as well as mechanism, mitigation, action, and technology development and transfer. Finally, we have a resource from e-courses and trainings from the Climate Technology Center and Network. This webinar series titled Blockchain Technologies across areas such as governance, renewable energy, climate mitigation and adaptation, climate markets, and value chains. Then we have finance, and it provides 36 total resources from 6 ICG bodies. The first 2 resources I will highlight are tools and methodologies. The Standing Committee of Finance provides their needs determination reports on the needs of developing country parties related to implementing the Convention and the Paris Agreement. It outlines aggregated information on needs in both quantitative and qualitative terms, based on national reports prepared by developing countries and information from international organizations. The second resource is from the Green Climate Fund. Their programming manual is an introduction to the GCF project cycle and project development tools for full-size projects. It provides an overview of the GCF project and program approval process and offer guidance on how to prepare and submit a funding proposal that meets GCF investment criteria while making the process more transparent and predictable. And the third and final resource falls under the category of e-courses and trainings. The Adaptation Fund offers a series of e-learning and virtual training courses that aim to help developing country organizations improve access to adaptation finance, including access to grants and small grants. And finally, the e-booklet on climate action with a focus on effective capacity building, including mainstreaming human rights, gender, indigenous people knowledge, education, and youth, provides 39 resources from 7 ICG bodies. The first example is titled Good Practice in Action for Climate Empowerment, and it is a compilation from the Action for Climate Empowerment process, which presents an analysis of 17 case studies from across the world, using education as a powerful catalyst for effective climate action. The next resource is a webinar series from the Facilitative Working Group of the Local Communities and Indigenous People Platform. And this series covers areas of trust and respect, ethical and equitable engagement of indigenous knowledge in the context of climate change, utilization of indigenous knowledge in knowledge synthesis and co-production of knowledge, and substantive and procedural measures to ensure that ethical engagement of indigenous knowledge holders and the use of indigenous knowledge within the context of climate change policy is taken into consideration. And the final resource to showcase comes from the PCCB, and it is an e-course, an introduction to climate change and human rights, which addresses how human rights obligations require the international community to take more ambitious action to mitigate emissions, to support adaptation that benefit persons, and in vulnerable situations in particular, and to address loss and damage associated with the impacts of climate change. And this was just to provide you with a glimpse of our booklets. They feature, of course, many more resources, and I really invite you to take a look. And on behalf of the entire ICG, I warmly invite you also to download and disseminate the booklets to your peer colleagues. So now I thank you again for your participation, and will give the floor to Jen Sedemond, Head of Environment and Development Cooperation Unit at the USCD, and he will deepen our understanding of coherence and coordination efforts outside the UNFCCC. Please, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Roberta. We had, for those of you who were there, we just had a panel discussion on capacity development issues, and a lot of what was discussed where basically came back to questions of what is effective support for capacity development, and I want to pick up on that. But I think before I want to do so, I would like to congratulate PCCB really for launching the series of ebooks, which are quite impressive and I think will be extremely useful for many stakeholders, not least the members of the OECD Development Assistance Committee we work with. And I think the toolkits are also extremely relevant today as we discuss crucial aspects of a collective effort in the face of climate change, and that is exactly the coordination, coherence of capacity building initiatives. I also wanted to thank again the PCCB network for the partnership that we've already had for 3 years now, and I think that was extremely useful for the OECD and the members of the Development Assistance Committee, which again, just for those who don't know, is the platform of the largest bilateral providers of development cooperation. Now, let me turn a bit now just to a brief presentation on effectiveness issues. And let me see if this works. So the context basically is let me start a bit with the finance. Now this is something that you may have seen. It's sort of the 100 billion assessment that the OECD does on a regular basis, which was released just a few weeks ago and came out with a figure of roughly 90 billion in 2021 from public sources as well as private finance mobilized. But at the same time, those resources capture climate-specific flows, basically, and not the entire actual underlying flows of these different sources where they come from. But most of these really come from, official development finance that is supporting climate objectives. And this is a quick presentation of a longer period on official development finance, total flows, bilateral and multilateral, and climate-related flows. That's official development finance that is supporting climate objectives, which is in the green. So in terms of the total flows towards developing countries of official development finance, we're close to 400 billion. In terms of the climate-related, we are around 150 billion in 2021. That is just the perspective of the actual flows. Now within that, there's multilateral and bilateral, and I'm sorry. No, let me just go a bit further. So this is the picture of support to capacity development of climate-related ODA by DAC members. And I don't want to dwell too long on this, but I think the interesting point is really that capacity is a very central aspect of the support to climate action in developing countries. You see it's between 29 and 34% over the years from 2015 to 2019, and this comes from a report that was released 2 years ago on capacity development support for climate action. It varies because capacity development also can be quite hard to capture, and what we try to do with our data analysis, for which the methodology is in the report, is we looked at sort of really core supports, in terms of actual training, education, etc. And that is the smaller sliver at the top, at the bottom. And then there are many activities, however, that include capacity aspects, capacity building aspects, when it comes to, both from hard infrastructure projects to the policy frameworks that require capacity in terms of their development and the understanding, and that is the big other part. But the bottom line from the analysis that we did was that really a very high share in the climate space focuses on capacity on capacity development issues, and that share actually is substantially higher in climate-related activities than in overall development finance, where it is only about 12 or 13%. Now, with that, let me move back actually in terms of the jump. So yeah, to this slide, which is about the development effectiveness agenda and principles. Some of you may be familiar with that or not, but basically it emerged a bit in parallel to the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. So it has a long origin, but the focus was really about saying how can we make sure that development cooperation and development finance is effective. And it started with a big first event in 2005 with the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness. Then there was the Accra Action Agenda, Busan Partnership Agreement, and it continued until 2022. And it was really a very major agenda that defined a lot of development cooperation for a long time. And it came up basically with a number of principles that was agreed by both developing countries, donor countries, multilateral institutions, but also civil society stakeholders and emerging providers from the South. And basically these 4 principles are here. And I'll try to explain them very briefly. And I think you will see that they resonate, and you hear them a lot also in the climate context. The first is the country ownership over the development process. And that is basically just a recognition of the practical necessity that you say, if a country is developed, it has to come out of the country. It has to be owned. It cannot be imposed from the outside. And so the ownership is really what is the basis for making development cooperation sustainable in terms of the results that it can provide. And that's obviously very important for the capacity context. The second point is on inclusive development partnerships, and that's the recognition, basically also coming from the ownership point, that it's development cooperation. It's not just a simple financial transaction, but it's the reality that a developing country partner and the partner from the providing side really have to work together and have to find a way where they say, okay, we build around the local ownership, but there are some things that some maybe donors or some agencies are well qualified to provide, and that also fits with how they can offer the support. The third point was a focus on results. Basically say, look, that is the next step where you say, you have the country ownership that you build around, you have the partnership. What is the way to define what everybody expects to come out of this cooperation? And that is, I think, very important to have an understanding, because it's about, on the one hand, respecting the ownership of the country, on the other hand, also the reality that the provider has an obligation to predefine the results when they release the money, that they say, this is what's expected from the cooperation. And I think the focus on results tries to reflect the fact that everybody wants to make sure the money that's used is as effective as possible, and having a common outlook on results is key. And the last point is really around transparency and mutual accountability, which is essential both for the trust of the partnership and for the things to work in terms of, what is expected, what are the resources provided, and being accountable for, for the actions that are taken. Now, a lot of the work areas that eventually culminated in these principles, they resonated very much in the discussions on climate change that we've heard. I mean, obviously, the ownership point is one that is very strong. But there are also issues around, predictability of funding that link to the transparency point, not just with regard to the ability to effectively use resources that come in. Questions around empowerment, questions around localization of development cooperation, and very much focus on harmonization and alignment of standards. And also just to say that, in the more recent effectiveness summits, there was a very explicit focus on the climate aspect, but already in 2011, the importance of effectiveness in climate finance was very much recognized in the Busan Partnership Agreement. Let me move on. So what do we see when we look at some of the priorities and challenges that have been identified, mostly by developing countries, but I think are also recognized very much on the donor side, and when that relate to capacity development in particular. It's sort of the reality that there are many partners that often have diverse priorities. You can also have diverse priorities at the country level. There's a challenge of the absence of standardization when it comes to all kinds of issues, from project proposals to general processes, etc. There's a challenge of fragmentation. Limited resources is a general challenge. I think that is invariably the case. But the question of how to integrate and work with national regional approaches, a lack of information sharing, something that we heard about also as a challenge in the last session, and resulting in duplication. Limited monitoring and evaluation, and in the context of climate change in particular, the fact that we're dealing with a very dynamic agenda where things move quite quickly. Now, the priorities in terms of addressing that from developing countries that we have sort of found were, a focus on strengthening the sectoral, national and subnational capacities. Basically, the integration of mitigation and adaptation action into actual sector planning, which is what shapes the approaches of certainly the public side, the public sector. For local actors, awareness raising, the question of access to finance, in that regard, developing proposals, the operationalization of national adaptation plans in particular, which again is very directly linked to the question of sectoral planning, and more effective coordination mechanisms between donors as well as legislation and policies. Again, something that we heard in the last session, where there was a real challenge to understand, if you're working in, for instance, the water sector, you don't know what is happening in the forestry sector or in the energy sector. Basically, that can lead to outcomes that are really suboptimal. Now, finally, development of information systems. And as a last but not least point, as we had covered, the capacity basically to contribute to climate negotiations. Now, I don't want to keep you much longer, just to say these things are really, they capture in the gist very much the key issues of what the effectiveness agenda was about. Now, going back a few years, the OECD developed a publication which was about aligning development cooperation and climate action, and we called it The Only Way Forward. And a number of recommendations came out, and these are selective. They had concerned recommendations in donor countries or donor institutions themselves, in developing countries and at the system level. And I'm just very briefly capturing here those that are, I think, very directly related to capacity development issues. Again, it's the integration of climate objectives into development plans, because usually that's what is shaping the reality of, again, of what's taking place. The broader reality, the broader development plans, which define macroeconomic approaches, sector approaches, etc. excuse me, and the need to say, at the end of the day, there's one reality. So if you have a climate plans, if you have NDCs, if you have NAPs, they need to be reflected in an overall plan, whatever that is. But that is a key capacity challenge, which we just saw before. Excuse me for my voice. The second is really the support to strengthen the local climate leadership, both at the government level, at the society level. But I think that's something that requires resources. And without those resources, you need to capacitate. You're not able to really capacitate that leadership to take root and express itself and take action. So really targeting resources for fundamental climate capacity. And then also the importance of integrating climate change into the broader development finance strategies of countries. You know, if you think about your international receipts, if you think about, but also, you know, domestic private sector development, if you think about domestic resource mobilization, tax systems, etc. So all of these aspects are crucially linked to capacity. Then at the international development system, again, there was a strong emphasis on the need to harmonize transparent official finance to catalyze broader flows. That's basically the capacity to dealing with, making it easier and making it more effective to mobilize private finance, which basically we've heard a lot about the fact that, you know, if you have a multiplicity of standards approaches, if you have each transaction is different, you'll always struggle to achieve scale because there's no one who has the capacity to redo every transaction from scratch. The importance of harmonizing standards and approaches for climate data, and that is both, I think, the direct climate data in terms of meteorological long-term climate data, but also risk-related data that is essential, again, for mobilization. And the point of standardizing procedures, harmonizing procedures and processes of developing countries. I'm almost done, so, but thanks, wonderful. So I hope I'll be fine. As a final point, again, the general point of harmonization of standards and procedures, basically to reduce transaction costs, which in particular, if you go to countries with smaller populations at lower income levels, is a real challenge for effectiveness. Now, just to conclude, basically what we came away with, however, is in essence the point that, you know, sound climate policy is sound development policy and vice versa. They really go together. Because at the end of the day, ambitious climate action reinforces developing countries' growth and development, but it's also the fact that development enhances the scope for climate action through enhanced capacities and resources mobilization. So, it's, you know, you could say it's really simple. I didn't, sorry, press the last point, so here we are. That's basically the last slide, the points that I just made. And I think the importance in terms of the development cooperation approach to think of climate change really as a development issue, just I think as OECD countries and high-income countries also think of it as an economic issue and a social issue in terms of well-being. But it's really that aspect that has come out very clearly in terms of the need to integrate that into development cooperation and international support. Again, at the core of that all is the capacity challenge that is, I think, both specific to climate, but fundamentally it's just the fundamental dimension of the development challenge overall. And well, we'll hope that the discussions today will help, again, share information on that, and we hope to continue to contribute and be part of this conversation. And I'd be happy to respond to any questions or you know, hear any comments. But I would like to thank you very much. And I don't know, Roberta, can I take it, turn it over to you again for this? Yes, okay. So thank you very much. And,
because we are a little late, so we will take any questions.
if anybody would like to, okay,
Yes,
yeah, okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens, for the insightful presentation. Thank you all for attending, and once again, thank to Jens and USCD for leading in the organization of the Effective Capacity Building Day. We are running a little bit late, so for any questions, we will be glad to take them like here outside, down the stage, because the next session is about to begin. But just let me recall once more that you can reach the PCCB anytime. On the web page, there's the email address pccb@unfccc.int, but you will find it on the web page of the UNFCCC. You also, of course, can learn more about the PCCB network and join also our page on LinkedIn to stay up to date with the news and activities. So thank you very much for attending this session this morning, and enjoy the next sessions today here at the Capacity Building Hub.